you're new in town or just new to this whole podcast thing, you're tuning in to Law by Night, the podcast that discusses all things vampiric with no fear of breaching the Masquerade. In this episode, we shall discuss the Road of Sin, one of the philosophical roads of enlightenment adopted by Cainites to control the beast, to better help you roleplay mysterious, sinful vampires. The last few times you have come here, we have spoken of vampires of various degrees of nobility. We have spoken of those with the desire to rule and guide both themselves and others into greatness, those who righteously hold on to their fractured humanity, and those who care not for either of those things as they run naked as the day where they were born. It doesn't offer much in terms of fun for the Cainites in question. The concept of fun is something we haven't really talked about. How does one have fun as one of the eternal damned? A semi-rhetorical question, but I do have an answer. Sort of. There are those who control their beast by indulging their whims and desires, regardless of who and what they hurt. Failure to do as they please makes their condition worse, which means morals, ethics, and laws usually fall by the wayside as they make their way along this path of enlightenment, one that was once called the Road of Sin. One should note that followers of the Via Peccati are not evil per se, but just completely self-indulgent, which can lead on to more diabolic mindsets, but not always. But what does that mean exactly? Well, in its simplest form, it is not being a slave. Cain was the first. He would refuse to repent to God time and time again. He wished to act on his own accord, not to submit to the might of the original creator. Cain desired to be himself, to not have his feelings and emotions be dictated to him. In short, he wished not to be a slave. We know this from the Book of Nod, but those writings had to come from somewhere, that place of course being Enoch. It caused some to question what it meant to be evil if we were damned, what was the true nature of humanity, and how we could use that knowledge to discover how we could be true to ourselves as Cainites without denying the needs of the beast. Whilst many would ponder over these questions for some time, myself included, the one who is credited for creating this road is a Tantabao Sahar, an alleged bruiser who wandered for over 300 years seeking the answers to life and humanity before settling in Carthage. Some sources I have collected hinted him being a Ravno or even a Barley, the latter making the most sense out of those proposals, but we will explore that a little bit later. But as I was saying, Tantabao Sahar spent years in seclusion for such a long time that many suspected he was in torpor. This was not the case, however, as he was actually compiling what he knew into what would become the main philosophies of the Road of Sin. His findings and teachings would attract the attention of many a Cainite scholar, such as the Titus Venturus Camillus, who we remember as Camilla, the most famous of Ventru princes. Whilst in Rome, Tantabao Sahar found the last of the pieces of knowledge he needed to complete his treatise on hunger and its satisfaction, which led to the creation of the Road of Desire. Camilla and his followers in Rome eagerly embraced the new road, and it spread quickly from there. I heard once that Tantabao actually made and recorded his discovery during a frenzy. This path would also blossom across Rome, attracting all sorts of individuals, including Tantabao's sire who, if we are to believe him to be of Clan Bruja, was Tyre, who summoned his child. The two, accompanied by many a ghoul bodyguard, disappeared on the journey, his final fate unknown. Soon after, the roads of Via Regalis, the Road of Kings, which had been the first road in Rome, and Via Ciale, the Road of Heaven, which was then a new philosophy to the city, began competing with the Road of Desire for domination. The battle between the three philosophies ate away at Rome's foundation, and eventually became one of the many reasons the city fell. During this time, the faithful of Via Ciale, the Road of Heaven, acquired nothing but disdain and began calling the Road of Desire Via Peccati, the Road of Sin, and its followers sinners. There were some that followed the old Roman faiths through one of the road paths called the Path of Watchful Gods, serving gods, making sacrifices, etc., etc. Some pagans followed this path as well, but I'm told most shamanic pagan Cainites stuck with the Path of the Eightfold Wheel. But I digress. The story I have just told you is far more complicated than that, as is the case with anything regarding the venture into Brujah, but what I've presented to you is all that you need to know to understand the most basic of facts regarding this road. To be a true follower of this road, you will submit to no king or god. When others exercise caution, you must act. Just saying you are free means diddly squat. It is something you have to practice. It is your body, your own life. You must lead it, not a monarch, goddess, and certainly not the beast. The sinners are wise in the sense that they know one cannot cage the bastard up. It is a part of you, made up of your lusts, desires, kinks, loves, and hates. It shares a space not just with your soul, but with your heart. This fleshy lump in your chest is where all your pleasure lies. You have to understand these things by letting your beast run free every so often, and when it runs, you may run too. It is very easy to understand, or at the very least appreciate, that this road is not to be taken lightly when being taught. Yes, one could say that with all the roads, but they are far more stable than this one. There is no limitation, other than whatever you bestow upon yourself. Sinners were chosen in the Dark Ages in their viewpoint to turn and look and hate everything they saw. The feudal system, the tyranny of the church, and the blatant sexism. The existence of the sinner is a colossal fuck you to the hypocrites of the world. Finding such tainted individuals was certainly a Herculean task to perform, as it still is now. Anyone can say they hate the rich or the predators in the church, but most do not have the willpower or stomach to really stir the pot, to perform horrible, inhumane atrocities to make a change. Sinners in this case are not weak. Sires who follow the road of sin do not embrace the weak of mind, spirit, and body. That said, no one is born ready for the task. I said earlier on, one does have to be taught how to be truly free. It is the responsibility of the sire to shatter the shackles of the child's former humane morals. It was often common practice to test the child's dedication by having them perform a series of tasks that forced them to break the 10 Commandments. I knew this was very popular in the courts of love in Paris. Whilst it was most common for Cainites to choose potential children whose faith and beliefs were already fickle, some chose those on the other end of the scale, to offer them true salvation, a spiritual endeavour only they can perform. It should come to no surprise to you that there are also tales of sinners recruiting those from other roads. The way the child is approached is very deliberate and, dare I say, almost sexy. Think how Eve was tempted by Lilith, presenting them with a forbidden knowledge that turns into a more seductive dance, a battle of wits and wills. Regardless of the outcome, the seed has been laid and it will blossom. Sinners would insist that this is a crude simplification of the process, so take my rudimentary understandings with a pinch of salt. So you may be wondering, are there any forms of punishment on a road as free as this? Well, as a matter of fact, there is. Apostasy, the act of refusing to continue to follow, obey, or recognize a religious faith, is looked down on all roads. An apostate on the road of sin is as good as dead to its fellow roadmates, for lack of a better term. Infernalism is also looked down upon, but not for the reason that may immediately spring to mind. Not because it is immoral or, as the kids would say, fucked up, but because you have submitted your will to a demon. You have sold your soul to the devil and his playthings, which is the only time you will ever hear that and won't be questioned whether I meant that in some weird satire. And despite this, the path of screams exists within the road. These kindred are truly one of a kind, reviled by all. They fall to the darkest hell-driven desires, whoring themselves to what lies beneath for their source of power and pleasure. Rather than reign over only themselves, they would rather serve in hell. In exchange, these kindred become agents of damnation, wreaking soul-killing destruction as they go. This path is mostly associated with the Bali and other insufferable infernalists. On occasion, screamers are often confused with the path of the devil, the single most highly organized group of Cainites within the road. Like others on the road, they exist purely for themselves, ignoring laws, clans, princes, and any other who would impose upon their own free will. Despite this, they are seen as one of the more humane paths on the road, for they will help others whose ability to act freely and without fear is threatened. There are two types of adversaries, the name given to those who follow this path. Adversary Prometheans who work to free the weak and helpless, seeking to undermine authority, whilst Adversary Foros take the fight directly to the top in an effort to end repression. On the other end of the road, you have the path of cruelty, perhaps the most debased path on the road. Remember those writings in Enoch I spoke of earlier? Said scriptures also speak of the Cainites who were created out of someone's hatred and anger, and these heartless fashion their beast to its most toxic and vicious, taming it to inflict pain upon others. They are taught to cut away the humanity from their minds, removing any sign of pity, compassion, and mercy, leaving only what you would call a true monster. These Cainites have no interest in petty mortal matters, showing a greater disdain than I do. This is a path that was very popular with members of Clan Tzimisce, in addition to some Toreador. Despite the nickname of Heartless, those who follow this path seek great pleasure with their hedonism. To that end, the road of cruelty is a warped and twisted path of pleasure. If wrath is the deadly sin adopted by the Heartless, then lust belongs to the Voluptuaries. Unlike the path of cruelty, those who follow the path of pleasure are driven by all the human desires, sex, wealth, any and all comforts that they gratify, be it physical, spiritual, mental, and emotional. To indulge the vulgar, crass, and ordinary is to go against the ethics of this path. Sensual fiends are fed to the beast, giving it what it wants, and using the finest fiends in life is a way to secure this sacrament. Shame, modesty, moderation, or morality are surefire ways to rouse the beast to anger, and thus those who follow the path of pleasure tend to seclude themselves from the real world as much as possible. The road of sin is a road that still exists in the modern night, be it with a fresh coat of paint. Well, I say that, but it would become the path of Caphari, which takes its inspiration from the Albigensians and Capharist heretics of the 12th and 13th century southern France. Without becoming too dry, the Capharians, or Albigensians as they are so often called, believe in two creators, one good and one bad. God is allegedly the good one, with the demiurge as the bad creator. God represents the spiritual elements, whilst the demiurge represents the physical matters, such as the body. To them, the Capharians I mean, all things that exist within the physical plane are evil, but their souls are good. Vampires on this path insist that they are the jailers keeping mortals away from God's divinity, meaning they are above the kine. The mortals are to be used as instruments to explore the pleasures of flesh and sin. I word this poetically simply for your own sanity. Albigensians are creatures of hunger and physicality, whose passions are dark, exploring extremes of eroticisms and obsessions that mortals that are just incapable of. Perversion is an inherent state for the undead, as is redemptionism. This requires the human participant to dismiss its humanity and become a mere puppet, a toy to be exploited to allow the Capharian to revel in their dominance and the depravity of the puppet. You give me 6 stares, but just think for a moment. The kine, for the most part, enjoy being fed upon. Is this truly a violation, or are they just being submissive? If they are, how far can one push this nature, this kink, as it were? Sexuality to some is just a social and evolutionary trick force procreation. We are given the tools in our fangs to bring this seduction upon others, to trap them, stealing their blood and life force. How can vampires be anything but beings of physicality, sin, and frustrated imprisonment? This child is the road of sin. It is a constant pursuit of what it means to be vampiric. The world is corrupt, and the sinners and the Caphari that exist in these modern nights wallow in it, like a pig in its own filth. It is not a path to rule, to feign ignorance, or just act like some deranged savage. Death is encouraged, for it leads to reincarnation. It is sinister, yes, but vampires are evil. We have no concepts to petty things like love or remorse. It would be foolish to trust anyone and grow intimacy with anything. Again, we lack such feelings, especially when you reach to someone as old as I. The mantra, "nothing is forbidden, everything is permitted," runs almost as thick as the blood in the veins of the followers of the path. The one exception to that is falling prey to the beast. Indulge in all that is forbidden. You are damned, lost to the darkness. The night and darkness belong to the vampires. Enjoy it. Revel in it. To be kept updated, follow the Law by Night VTM Twitter and Instagram pages to find out when we will upload each episode. You can also find out by subscribing to the YouTube channel and clicking on the little bell, as you'll be immediately notified when the latest episode is live. Until next time, farewell.